World War II was the most devastating conflict in modern history, involving nations across the globe with vastly different goals and ambitions. At its core, the war was a clash between two major coalitions: the Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy and Japan, and the Allies, including the United States, Soviet Union, United Kingdom and China. Each nation entered the war with specific objectives, territorial, political and ideological, that drove strategies, alliances and key battles. The Axis powers sought to expand their empires, secure vital resources, and impose their political and ideological vision on conquered territories. Germany aimed to dominate Europe, Italy sought to revive the glory of its Mediterranean empire, and Japan pursued control of East Asia and the Pacific. In contrast, the Allies were united by the need to stop aggression, defend sovereignty, and restore international stability, though each also pursued its own national interests. Understanding these nations, their goals, and the reasons they fought is essential to grasping how World War II unfolded and why it reshaped the modern world. This video explores the major powers on both sides, their ambitions, and the strategies they employed to achieve their objectives. The Axis powers were the coalition of nations that sought to expand their influence and impose authoritarian control during World War II. The core members included Germany, Italy and Japan, each pursuing territorial and political ambitions, while several smaller nations and collaborators aligned with them to varying degrees. Germany, under Adolf Hitler, aimed to dominate Europe, overturn the Treaty of Versailles, and establish a racially defined Aryan empire. Italy, led by Benito Mussolini, aspired to restore the glory of the Roman Empire and expand its Mediterranean influence. Japan, under Emperor Hirohito and militaristic leadership, sought to control East Asia and the Pacific, securing resources and establishing the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Despite differences in geography and strategy, these nations shared common goals: authoritarian rule, military conquest, and the suppression of opposition. Their coordination, both politically and militarily, created a formidable coalition that initially achieved rapid and dramatic victories, setting the stage for the global conflict that would engulf the world from 1939 to 1945. Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, was the central force of the Axis powers, driven by a vision of European domination and racial supremacy. Hitler sought Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people, aiming to expand eastward into Poland, the Soviet Union, and beyond. He also wanted to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, which he considered humiliating, and establish a vast Aryan empire. To achieve these goals, Germany employed blitzkrieg tactics, combining rapid mechanized assaults, coordinated air power, and psychological intimidation. Early successes, including the invasions of Poland, France, and the Low Countries, demonstrated the effectiveness of Germany's strategy and struck fear. Hitler's ambitions extended beyond territorial expansion. His regime sought total control over occupied populations, resulting in oppressive policies, forced labor, and the systematic extermination of millions, particularly through the Holocaust. Germany's strategic and ideological goals made it a formidable, aggressive force that challenged the world and forced the Allies into a global conflict. Italy, under the leadership of Benito Mussolini, joined the Axis powers with ambitions rooted in nationalism and historical grandeur. Mussolini sought to recreate the Roman Empire, extending Italian influence across the Mediterranean, North Africa, and parts of Europe. Italian forces launched campaigns to invade Ethiopia, Albania, and Greece, and later coordinated with Germany in North Africa. While Mussolini's forces often struggled against well-prepared opponents, his goals were clear: expand territory, assert Italy as a global power, and support the broader Axis strategy of challenging Allied nations. Italy's alignment with Germany allowed for coordination in military operations, although the Italian army's limitations and over-reliance on German support often hampered its effectiveness. Mussolini's vision combined ambition with propaganda, portraying Italy as a revived imperial power, but ultimately Italy became increasingly dependent on Germany as the war progressed. Japan joined the Axis powers with ambitions of regional dominance and resource security. The nation sought to control East Asia and the Pacific, establishing the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere as a bloc of allied Asian nations under Japanese leadership. To achieve these goals, Japan invaded China, Southeast Asia, and Pacific Islands, aiming to secure raw materials such as oil, rubber, and minerals necessary for sustaining its military-industrial complex. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 marked Japan's direct challenge to the United States and escalated the conflict into a truly global war. Japanese strategy relied heavily on naval power, rapid conquest, and fortifying captured territories to create defensible positions. While initially successful, overextension and fierce Allied resistance ultimately weakened Japan's campaigns. The country's ambitions reflected both economic necessity and militaristic ideology, driving one of the most brutal and far-reaching theatres of World War II. The Allies were the coalition of nations that opposed the Axis powers, united by the need to defend sovereignty, uphold international stability, and stop aggressive expansion. The core members included the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and China, with other nations such as Canada, Australia, France, and Poland playing crucial supporting roles. Unlike the Axis, the Allies did not share a single ideology beyond opposition to fascism and militarism. Instead, they coordinated militarily, politically, and economically to counter Axis advances. Each nation brought unique strengths: the industrial and logistical power of the United States, the manpower and resilience of the Soviet Union, and the strategic planning and global reach of the United Kingdom. The Allied coalition also coordinated strategies across multiple theatres of war, from Europe to the Pacific, blending resources, intelligence, and diplomatic efforts. This cooperation was essential to turning the tide against Axis forces and ultimately achieving victory in 1945. Initially committed to neutrality, the United States entered World War II after Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Prior to this, the US supported Allied nations through programs like Lend-Lease, providing weapons, equipment, and financial aid to combat Axis aggression while avoiding direct involvement. Once fully engaged, the United States aimed to defend democracy, stop Axis expansion, and protect its global economic interests. American forces fought in both the European and Pacific theatres, participating in critical operations such as D-Day, the island-hopping campaigns in the Pacific, and major battles that crippled Axis forces. The US leveraged its industrial capacity, technological innovation, and manpower to become a decisive factor in the Allied war effort. Its strategy combined military might with logistical superiority, supporting coalition partners while advancing its own national interests in shaping the post-war world. The United Kingdom played a crucial role in the Allied coalition, standing firm against Axis aggression from the war's earliest days. Britain's primary goals were to protect its empire, defend national sovereignty, and maintain a balance of power in Europe. British forces faced relentless challenges, including the Battle of Britain, in which the Royal Air Force defended the skies against the Luftwaffe's sustained bombing campaign. Beyond Europe, the UK coordinated campaigns in North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Asia, ensuring that Axis forces could not expand unopposed. Strategic alliances with the United States, the Soviet Union, and other Allied nations allowed Britain to contribute to joint operations, share intelligence, and provide critical logistical support. The UK's determination and resilience exemplified the spirit of defiance and played a pivotal role in sustaining Allied efforts until the tide of war turned. The Soviet Union was a critical member of the Allies, entering the war in response to Germany's invasion in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa. Its primary goal was to defend its territory, repel the Nazi invaders, and secure influence over Eastern Europe. The USSR faced some of the most brutal battles of the war, including the Siege of Leningrad, the Battle of Stalingrad, and the Battle of Kursk, where Soviet forces absorbed immense casualties but ultimately turned the tide against Germany. Soviet strategy combined massive manpower, strategic counteroffensives, and harsh environmental conditions, including the Russian winter, to exhaust and defeat Axis forces. As the war progressed, the Soviet Union advanced into Eastern Europe, capturing key cities and territory, and ultimately linking with Western allies to surround Germany. The USSR's enormous sacrifices and strategic offensives were decisive in the Allied victory and in shaping the post-war geopolitical order. China was a key member of the Allied coalition, engaged in a prolonged struggle against Japanese aggression that began in the early 1930s. Its main goal was to defend sovereignty, protect territorial integrity, and resist Japanese occupation. Chinese forces faced overwhelming odds, including superior Japanese equipment and widespread occupation. Despite this, both the nationalist government and Chinese communist forces organized resistance efforts, waging guerrilla warfare, defending key cities, and maintaining prolonged campaigns to tie down Japanese forces. China's resistance was crucial in diverting Japanese resources from other fronts and supporting the broader Allied strategy. Though heavily impacted by casualties and devastation, China's persistence contributed to Japan's overextension and eventual defeat, making it an indispensable part of the Allied victory in the Pacific and Asia. The Axis powers and allies entered World War II with very different objectives, and these ambitions shaped every aspect of the conflict. The Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, sought territorial expansion, political domination, and ideological influence. Germany aimed to conquer Europe and establish Aryan supremacy. Italy wanted to revive its Mediterranean empire, and Japan sought control of East Asia and access to vital resources. The Allies, in contrast, were united by the goal of halting Axis aggression and defending national sovereignty. Each member also pursued individual interests. The United States sought to protect democratic nations and global economic stability. The United Kingdom aimed to preserve its empire and influence. The Soviet Union focused on survival and territorial security, and China fought to maintain its independence. These conflicting ambitions dictated strategy, alliances, and the theatres of war. Axis aggression prompted global responses, while Allied coordination allowed for combined offensives across Europe, Africa, and Asia. The interplay of these goals determined major campaigns, influenced tactical decisions, and ultimately shaped the outcome of World War II. While the major powers of World War II often dominate the narrative, numerous smaller nations played critical roles in shaping the conflict. On the Axis side, countries such as Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Finland aligned with Germany and Italy, contributing troops, resources, and strategic support. Their motivations ranged from territorial gains and political alignment with fascist ideologies to survival against nearby threats. Some joined voluntarily, while others were coerced or compelled by circumstance, but each added to the Axis's ability to project power across Europe. The Allies also included a broad coalition of nations, from the Commonwealth countries like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, to governments in exile from occupied Europe, including Poland, Norway, and the Netherlands. These nations contributed soldiers, pilots, and critical intelligence to the Allied war effort. For instance, Polish forces fought valiantly in France, Britain, and on the Eastern Front, while Norwegian resistance aided sabotage operations against German forces. Though smaller in size, these nations were essential to sustaining the global coalition against the Axis powers and ensuring that the Allies could fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. The ambitions of both Axis and Allied nations not only drove the war, but also influenced the post-war geopolitical landscape. The Axis powers' desire for territorial conquest, ideological dominance, and control of resources ultimately overextended their capabilities. Germany's rapid expansion left it vulnerable on multiple fronts, Italy's military weaknesses required constant German support, and Japan's vast Pacific ambitions led to supply strains and vulnerability to US counteroffensives. These strategic miscalculations, combined with overwhelming Allied coordination, led to the Axis collapse. On the Allied side, wartime ambitions also shaped the post-war world. The United States and the United Kingdom sought to secure spheres of influence and prevent the resurgence of totalitarian regimes, while the Soviet Union expanded its influence over Eastern Europe as compensation for its enormous sacrifices on the Eastern Front. China aimed to preserve sovereignty and regain territory lost to Japanese occupation. These overlapping goals led to tensions even among the Allies, foreshadowing the Cold War, as former partners navigated competing interests in Europe and Asia. The interaction of these ambitions also determined the nature of peace treaties, borders, and international institutions. The creation of the United Nations, the division of Germany, and the establishment of occupation zones all reflected the interplay of national goals and the lessons learned from wartime strategy. In many ways, Understanding the ambitions of each nation during WWII is essential not only for interpreting the war itself, but also for comprehending the shape of global politics in the decades that followed. World War II was defined not only by battles and military might, but by the ambitions of nations. The Axis powers sought conquest, resources, and ideological dominance, while the Allies fought to defend sovereignty, restore stability, and protect the freedoms of their citizens. These objectives drove every strategic decision, from massive invasions to intelligence operations and prolonged resistance campaigns. Understanding the goals of each nation provides critical insight into why World War II became the largest and deadliest conflict in human history. The clash between the Axis and Allied ambitions not only determined the outcome of the war, but also shaped the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century, influencing borders, alliances, and international relations for decades to come.